How
Oh,
you doing?
Cullen.
How's your health, by the way? Last time we spoke, you were a bit under the weather.
Yes, I had the COVID. I'm back. You're going to get a much more energized, clear version of me today.
Well, good, good. I'm glad. I'm glad you bounced back from the COVID and hopefully the antibodies and stay with you for a while. Your daughter got it as well. Is that correct?
My son, yeah, good memory. Yeah, he fortunately he was good to go.
Okay.
So he has the antibodies now, and he was just a 6-year-old bouncing off the walls because he couldn't go anywhere,
Yeah,
which
right.
was its own experience. But I'm so excited to have you on here. I've been following your work for so long, and I just love what you're doing. I just think and especially now, I'm biased. I always think incorporating the creative arts in some way is just a fun way for us to get to the serious side of putting things to practice that really make effective change. But the way that you bring it, it's such, like, I've seen videos you've done, I've heard interviews you've given, and read your book. It's high. I have some um, I had to go through all the highlights and like choose like which is my favorite highlighted section to bring into today. But you're so welcome. Like the through line is that you're so welcoming. There's a consistent sense of who you are in your book, to your interviews, to the videos that you guys put out, to even talking to you. There's no surprise in the best way possible. And I think that's no easy feat to get through in the written word.
Oh, that's so flattering. It's so nice to hear. And
Really?
thank you. It's such a great compliment. And of course, I've been had the opportunity to get to know you from a distance as well and follow your career as well. So I appreciate you reading the book and I appreciate all your kind words. And I can't wait to chat with you today.
It's awesome. So I'm going to give the long and short. If people want to learn more about you, we'll add that at the end. But so you have decades worth and still actively involved with classic traditional improvisational theater. You found a way to go, let's take those tenets and incorporate them into business. So I would love to know that moment where you were like, this makes so much sense, and why you feel like it was so needed.
You know, I love improv. Let's start there, all right? And I don't think it was one moment. My undergrad degree was in business. I left, and I was very successful at a very early age, my early 20s, in creative marketing. And at the time that I'm getting headhunted in Chicago for real jobs for adults, I leave business completely and immerse myself in improvisation. And that wasn't by happenstance. I when I was 19, after my freshman year in college, before my sophomore year, the summer I went up to Chicago from downstate Illinois and studied at an intensive over the summer with the person who would be my mentor, Martin DeMont. And so learning improvisation was like, oh, this is awesome. And so when I got to this age around 23, 24, when it was time to press the gas in business, I left to dive into improv and really, I was all in. I quit. I didn't do a day job for 5 years. I did everything possible to scrounge money and burn through my savings account. However, that time that it was time to link improvisation to business also, I think, was complemented by the fact I was working in all those Chicago improv houses and I was doing their corporate improv stuff. And it was very much like, a snake oil salesman, that it was just screaming yes and at people. And they were like, it was fun. You can't use it. It has no purpose in business. I was like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. And at that time, 25 or so, 26, I didn't have any pull whatsoever. I was getting, I was told what to do. It was not a collaborative environment in some of those improv houses.
Isn't that the
So
irony of it all? Because isn't it supposed to be bred in collaboration?
it is. It is. And what you'll find, though, just on the theater side of things, is that there's a consistency in the way that theaters are run. They don't follow the tenets of improvisation in business. And I think there's a huge mistake there, that the tenets of improvisation are really the guiding principles. It's what a lot of people will hold as values to each other. And the ironic thing, a lot of those great famous improv and sketch comedy houses don't run in that way. They run in almost an authoritarian style, and they're successful. So maybe that works. Shepherding a bunch of kind of robe hyper pirates that improvisers are. that if it's not nailed to the floor, we're either going to take it or do a bit with it. So it's like, maybe that's the way to run those types of businesses. It wasn't something that sung to me. And so by the time I got the chance to create something, I just wanted to create something the way that I knew worked. And that was following the tenets of improvisation as truly the guiding path and principles.
So you said a few minutes ago that you were like, you're wrong. This does work in business
Yeah.
at that young of an age, like in your 20s. So what was it that stood out to you? I think that's what I meant when I said like that aha moment. And again, it may have been not this one big light bulb, but what made you go, it totally does work at that young of an age?
Just so even at that young of an age, I was using improvisation to produce sketch comedy. Let's just use that as a great example with some buddies, Joe Canale and Scoopy and Weaselicious. Essentially, was the group. We would do sketch comedy, and we would just like brain dump. We would just get it all out there and just this giant, messy, guilty party. And Black Chair was doing the same thing. Just get it all out there, and then we'll separate really what we created from the creation process.
Yes.
And that's a really clear example of postponing judgment and divergent thinking and leveling the playing field, so leveling status, leveling ego, and just turning into this great collaborative environment to produce real world tangible outcomes. And in this purpose, it's sketch comedy. And hearing business people go through these programs, which were very surface level type of programs, and say that they can't use it, I saw the opportunity that was being missed at that time. There wasn't a two at that time. It was just, this is being missed. And part of it is communication. Part of it is really understanding what these tenets are, because the people who were teaching, at least at that time, weren't really improvisers either. They were people who taught improvisation. And there's a big difference between a practitioner of improvisation who can teach and somebody who just teaches. And not to diminish one or the other, rather, one, you're in it. You are in it. And in Chicago, especially in the mid 90s, in it is every night of the week for years and years and years and years and years. And so you are just, it's your blood, it's your life, it's your love. It's where you want it. You don't burn out. You're just impossible. You love it so much. And that type of passion really creates a different insight into how it's applied to something in the business world, because I loved business as well. It just wasn't at that time my calling in life.
Mm-hmm.
Little did I know I was going to end up putting the two of these things together, which would be my calling. But it's that type of commitment that creates a different level of insight, and that's I think where the aha comes from.
Yeah, and so I'm hearing that you had that regenerative energy, right? It was something where there's no burnout because your energy keeps being regenerated versus depleted, which is such a huge sign of that you're in. I mean, across the board, that crosses over for anybody listening, just to pay attention to that, right? Wherever you're feeling that sense of regenerative energy, that's kind of your yes, yes,
Yeah.
keep following that, and so I'm wondering where so you saw, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense, because taking improv tenets into corporations and organizations, it levels the playing field. It allows us to have a brain dump where there's no hierarchy. It's just, we're all moving towards this goal or this vision. So we're going to brain dump in that direction, right? And then see and then sift through from there. So it allowed everybody to create that sense of, it's chicken. I'm wondering what your perspective is on this too, is the chicken or egg idea. Because I was about to say it allows everybody to create that sense of trust where they can brain dump because they're not going to feel silly. Like, oh, that's a silly idea. So I'm wondering what your thought is in regards to having that supportive, safe, so to speak, sense of brainstorming where it's really effective, where I may be like, this is really silly, I'm going to throw this idea out. And then if I didn't trust you and the people in the space, you wouldn't maybe go, oh my gosh, Christy, that's making me think of this. And then the next person, and all of a sudden we have this great idea that we're putting forward. If I didn't feel like I could trust you to feel judged or silly, I would not put that idea out there. So what's your thought on chicken or egg? That you need to get personal and humanize each other to create trust, or does trust come first?
trust comes second. I'm not sure if that's the egg or the chicken in this scenario. However, I would put the egg with the legs sticking out of it as trust, and that's second, because you develop trust through relationships. Now, you can create psychological safety. You can create these great environments in which people are postponing judgment and unconditionally accepting ideas and develop trust, surely. However, that comes from the relationship building aspect of things. Trust is not inherent. It's not like dignity. Dignity is inherent. It's only taken away by other people or when you diminish your own dignity, as opposed to trust. You don't inherently trust people because, you know, for better or worse in life, and I'm going to say unfortunately, we learn as we grow up. We both have, I have a 5 and 8 year old, you have a 6 year old, they're going to learn over time that the trust is not there. People will stab you in the back. People will stab you in the face. It's just like it's a hard world. And so I think without that trust, you cannot have that true psychological safety. And something else you mentioned, though, I think is super important. And since maybe, we mentioned Martin DeMott early, he's going to be on my brain in this conversation. For those who don't know Martin, legend in Chicago improvisation, credited with Sheldon Patinkin for creating the Second City Training Center. Just a truly glorious individual, passed away in 2001. He used to say that it's a basic human desire to be understood. A basic human desire to be understood. Now, if this is true, and I would encourage everyone to think about like what relationship you have in your life. Who are the best relationships that you have? The things that like draw you to people. It's those people who get us, that understand us. And so if it's a basic human desire to be understood, that means we find value in contributing. We feel valuable when we contribute. And so we have this inherent need to be part of a collaborative environment in which our voice is heard and we are seen. And then you can start creating that psychological safety when you know everybody's got each other's backs and you trust each other.
Bob, you can't make this up. And I'm going to show everybody this so they can see that you and I didn't kind of create this bit ahead of time. I already have marked what I wanted to focus on with you. From what you just said, the one area that I asterisked here, we're all in people businesses built of personal bonds and personal connections. We know there's a basic human desire to be understood. And the thing that connects us in all the great relationships in our lives is that somebody gets us. That's what I asterisked to focus on. And you just nailed it. Like, that's what it is, right? And so I love that you just honed in on that, because I feel like that's such a visceral feeling. Like, we know, we can feel when we're gotten and when we're not gotten. It's almost like you can't really explain it. It's like you can't explain cilantro, right? You can't explain what it tastes like. It's the same thing as like feeling gotten. You just can't. It's a feeling. We all know it. It's that feeling. So I guess the trust thing, while you were talking, I was able to formulate it more. There are people who tend to go, I trust you till you give me a reason not to. Like, they go in a very optimistic, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt going for, like, just straight out of the gate. So I think that's what I meant, but it does make sense that trust is earned and it's built through these moments. So one thing that I love, and I'd love for you to dive into, is when it comes to creating that sense of trust, it's going to be a twofold question. So just overarching, creating that sense of trust within teams, within organizations. Do you have like a cross industry, this is absolutely one step to start that incorporates an improv tenet? What would it be?
Are we talking in person or virtual?
Well, that was going to be my second. So I'm going to let you run with that.
Okay.
So you can.
So yeah. Let's go one that will
Transcend.
Yeah, transcend both of them. It will build the bridge.
Okay.
Listening, right? If you go to improvisation at its core is a communication and collaboration-based art form, right? That's what we do up on stage. The outcome is comedy. The outcome is drama. The outcome is entertainment of some kind. Hopefully, if there's the improvisers on stage are any good, the audience is not mad at them. You know, they escaped and had a good time. It's still communication and collaboration, even if it's solo improv against the audience or with the audience. Really, they use the audience as the team. They make a joke. The audience responds like, "Okay, I will respond to your response," and the audience responds to their response, and they go back and forth in this giant sort of collaborative team environment. It's all though about focus, concentration, presence, being in the moment at a very high level and listening intently, intensely. It's listening to understand, not listening to get your good idea out, get your joke out there, because that's typically where you square peg round hole something or step on somebody's toes up on stage and you look like you're showboating or trying to upstage somebody else. It's really valuing what somebody else is saying. And I'll go to another improv legend, Susan Messing. Susan Messing, Chicago Improv Hall of Famer, if there's such a thing, a legend, legend, legend. She used to say, words are gold. Words are gold. And the way that I interpreted that is, if words are gold, you don't, if somebody tries to give you gold, you don't ignore them. Like, I don't have time for your gold. And, if you're going to give me gold, I'm going to want your gold. It's gold. On the reverse side of that, if words are gold, you just don't like give gold to everybody. You're just like throwing it around everywhere willy-nilly. You give it to specific people for specific reasons. So you put that type of emphasis, that type of value on words, for example, then all of a sudden, not only do the words become important, the people bringing the words to you become important. And this is where it will transcend any medium, phone, Zoom, in person. I'll give you a quick in-person one though. Eye contact, eye contact, eye contact, eye contact. It's the windows to the soul. It's true.
I just heard Daniel Goleman, the father of emotional intelligence.
Sure.
I heard him. I think it was in his podcast, First Person Plural, which is a great podcast on emotional intelligence for anyone who's listening, saying how the Zoom camera that's here is in the wrong spot. It should be like right over your eyes. So it's like I'm looking at you, because we lose so much of that when we're on Zoom. So it's like, it's better than nothing. At the same time, there is something so different about really feeling that eye contact. It's so immediate and immediately intimate, which is why so many people may look away and kind of feel, because it's like the contradiction of everybody wants to be seen and everybody doesn't want to be seen. Like we want to be gotten, and then when we start feeling seen, there's like a sense of, oh, this is getting intimate. What do we do? So I love the listening piece, and I'm wondering, so listening to understand, it's hard. That's really hard, especially in organizations where there are different personalities, like any organization. And if we're taking specific teams, for example, just to narrow it down, and how would you say people even start? If we're in the middle, we're going to say that it's not a toxic environment where there's backstabbing and there's total distrust. It's also not like a utopia. It's people are doing their work. There is good work ethic. There's a little bit of a disjoint. We want to be able to create more of a cohesive sense. Where would you suggest people even start with enhancing their listening? How would they do that?
First of all, I think it comes from leadership. There's got to be a clear communication from leadership that this is a mandate. It's not a suggestion. This is the way that we're going to go forward. And then I think there's got to be some accountability practices in place as well. It doesn't have to be accusatory accountability practices. It needs to be something, though, to hold people accountable, because the tendency will slip. The human brain can process way more words a minute than people speak. So we have extra brain power that we're just not, delegating. We're just not directing it properly. And so we need this redirection of brain power to be focused. And sometimes we drift, we slip, right? Or the brain just moves so fast that we just lose focus. We start thinking about what we're going to say next. Or we start thinking about emails that we need to send out. And if you could see that in somebody else, there's techniques for accountability that don't involve like, you weren't listening to me, Christy. It's like, let me know what you understand about that. Something like that puts it back on them. That way they're like, oh, okay, well, I pretty much have to either repeat back to you what you said to me, or I at least have to paraphrase in such a way to show you that I understand or don't understand. That way we can at least find clarity. And that to me, I think is super important. And of course, the tenets of improv, yes and, is a great way to actually do that, to show that you're listening. Because you cannot yes and somebody without listening to them.
And you can't. And I love how, if you could say in your own way, I'm thinking from the book, but in your own way, how yes is not necessarily agreeing. That yes and yes and means what? Let's get clear on that. It's not that you're agreeing, it's what is it? What is it?
Yeah. All right. So the way that we use it is different than how it's used in comedic or theatrical improvisation, right? So let's put a little asterisk on that, because yes, in comedic improvisation, at least in theory, means I agree with you. And then the and means I build directly on what you say, which isn't true either, by the way, which we can get deeper into that in a second. The reality, though, yes, in the way that we use it in business improv, yes means I'm focusing on you. I'm listening to you. I'm trying to understand what you're saying on your terms without interjecting subtext or trying to push any agenda on my side. I'm truly just invested in what you're saying. So yes, then, more than anything, becomes thoughtfulness. Yes is you do have my undivided attention right now. I'm here. I'm present with you. I'm in the moment. And then and is the bridge to your voice, your mind, your background, your drive, your passion, your authentic you. So this is where it becomes, on a definition level, different than comedic improvisation. The
Sure.
reality, though, is if you watch good improvisers, they twist and turn yes and 100 different ways, and it's not pure agreement and building on. That's surface level.
And it's very much, one of the things for you, going off of that the yes is thoughtfulness. One strategy that I give clients when we do workshops where we bring in yes and is, yes also buys you time to slow down your immediate reaction. So it just gives you that option of going yes. And it's also so it's a win-win, because it's also for you to just go, I am passing judgment right now, or I'm not agreeing with this right now, and I'm still choosing to listen to this person, so that you can slow your reaction from being just checking a box, like, yeah, a good manager listens to them and I'm just going to say yes and, so we don't want that. And it also allows you to start formulating your thoughts so that it is a genuine response, versus I'm going to say something that sounds like I'm listening and I'm completely judging and disagreeing with you. So it slows you down. So I use it as like also a strategy for people who may be fired up or going from one thing to the next. It may even be like, yes, and I want to listen to you right now. I want to finish this email first, so I'll get back. I mean, it could be that,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
It doesn't have to be giving a response to what they're saying. Can you
Yes.
have anything to add? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, you can use yes and yes, I want to listen to you, and I have to finish this email so that I can give you my undivided attention. And I need a half an hour so that I can keep the momentum to kick this project out, so that when I come to you, I'm not thinking about the project that I need to be doing. Because this brain is so powerful, you can direct it and it creates sheer force, right? So that type of momentum isn't this like cut and dry. I can just leave what I'm doing alone to immediately enter something else. You could train your brain to get faster at that without question. The reality is, improvisers show up early before gigs to warm up, to shed the inhibitions of the day, to get in the zone, to get up on stage, so that they're not carrying over the crappy conversation they had with the bus driver on the way to the gig, or the laundry list of stuff they need to do, or an argument they got into, or whatever it might be. Good, bad, sad news. That you try to like separate reality from what you're going to create up on stage, and that's the same thing that we need to do for ourselves. You reminded me of a phrase again, early Chicago improv: think slow to move fast.
Mm.
Think slow to move fast. You learn it super early in Chicago improv. Slow down, be present, be in the moment at a very high level. It's not how fast can you get your words out. It's not bits per minute all the time. It is be present, be in the moment, and listen to what's being said, and then react to it, respond to what's being said right there. And so that slowing of the brain down, you can use yes and to slow the brain down. And as you, I think, so wonderfully articulated, you use yes and to postpone judgment. It's it's a key component of postponing judgment, not abandoning judgment. It's to say, I fundamentally disagree with what you're saying, so let me hear it all. Let's get it all on the table and let's see what we do agree on. And that might be enough of a bridge to show you why my perspective is so different than your perspective in this situation that exists in life right now.
And so much of what you're saying, the foundation of that is trust for so much of what you said. So what you just said, trust is so foundational to want to even care to listen to the other person, right? So that's the first. The second is attention is respect. So again, it's that visceral feeling of feeling gotten.
Yes.
You can feel respect. You know, you ask people, what does respect? I've asked so many people in workshops, from teenagers all the way up to adults, like, what does respect mean? For a lot of people, it's hard to articulate because they'll give situations or experiences or moments because it's a feeling. We know when we're feeling respected and we know when we're not. And so much of that has to come with giving attention. And it doesn't mean constant undivided attention to Bob or to Christy. It's just also knowing when it's that moment of, I'm so swamped right now, or, you know what, I'm about to lose it. I need to step away for a second. That's respect. It's that self-awareness, right? It doesn't mean that through everything that you're saying, it's going to create this harmonious utopia, no conflict zone workplace. It's that, it sounds like from what you're saying, it also offers the tools for teams and for leaders to be able to work through difficult conversations and conflict. I love that think slow, move fast. Is that what?
Think slow to move fast.
Can you bring that into just your either a process or your thoughts or strategies on how what you've said so far can help with being a support to difficult conversations or conflict?
Oh, absolutely. So whether it's an irrational escalation of commitment or you're just fired up in the moment, you get blindsided by somebody in a conflict, or especially in these environments where you can't read nonverbal communication. So there's so many layers that you can't understand, and you really just have to Sherlock Holmes deduce what's being said and put pieces of the puzzle in place. It's so important to slow the brain down because we get on that emotional roller coaster, right? You get on that sled and it's just riding rapidly. And a good chunk of the time, we don't even know it. You know, this is where you start thinking about like multitasking. And when you overload, you have so many things on your to-do list. And so you try to do a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here. And you pick something else up. And then all of a sudden somebody did something. And then the curveball happens. That's not a curveball that wipes everything else away. It's just now you have to deal with this, with everything else that's going on. And so you're grabbing things. That's typically where you're like, look back, you're like, oh, right, I forgot to do this, and that was pivotal to that thing over there. So you go do this, and then all of a sudden the stove is going off, and you're like, I don't even remember turning the stove on. You know, so you have to slow the brain down to really understand what's going on in any situation. And I'll go quickly to what the special forces say. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It's the same concepts. In times of chaos and uncertainty and lots of movement, it's the people who can slow all this down in real time. And I always equate this to the Matrix, the good Matrix, the first one where the bullet's whizzing by Neo. We see that 360-degree camera and he's going backwards, and you see the ripples behind the bullet. That's good improvisation. That's the ability to slow the brain down so much so you see the ripples behind the bullet as it cuts through your fabric. One little fiber at a time, another fiber at a time, and you see everything in slow motion. That's the ability then to extend that to communication. So as it relates to a conflict, if you feel yourself get worked up, let's go to some classic conflict management type of techniques where go to the window, get a drink of water. Let's call a timeout on this one, all right? Let's think about what's important and come back in an hour, half an hour, 15 minutes, a day. Let's just process what's being said so we're not caught up in this like fast response game. And that includes with emails as well. Let an email sit for 24 hours, especially if it pisses you off.
That's what draft is for, right? Save it as a draft.
That's the thing though. Don't send it. Don't accidentally send it.
Exactly.
and the to list, get their email addresses out of there.
Yes. And you talking about, because I do sense, and myself included, that when there is specific situational difficult conversations or conflict, we usually have a tendency to go right to fight or flight. So our fight could be verbally amped up, going quicker to just skip over and talk through the discomfort,
Yep.
right? Or
Sure.
just mentally shut out. So we're not fully hearing because we're like, I don't know how to handle, especially if there's power differentials. If you're talking to a direct supervisor, or if you're talking to your colleague, or you're talking to a direct report, you may have totally different feelings with all of them. And so it's that I'm hearing so much self-awareness. It's that self-awareness component of paying attention to what activates you so that you're able to, I mean, there's so many strategies, that's a different conversation, but how to be able to handle that so that you've set yourself up to win, even if it's uncomfortable. It doesn't mean it's not going to be that uncomfortable. I love that slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah.
Because I hear that as slow is smooth and smooth is fast in regards to it being sustainable of hitting a flow.
I think it's not only hitting a flow. I think it's so. I've worked with a lot of special forces, and even in the book, Captain Jamie Sands, a Navy SEAL. I think he was SEAL Team 2 at that time, captain of SEAL Team 2. They consider themselves problem solvers. That this is what's happening in real time. So it might be momentum based. It might also be what's the closest distance between 2 points. How do I create that short straight line so that we can solve this problem to get on to the next problem? And I think that's part of building relationships as well. It's in those times of everybody gets in conflict.
Sure.
Everyone. Anybody tells you they're not in conflict is living in a bubble. And I don't even know if I want to be in that bubble, because with that, with passion comes people wearing their emotions on their sleeves, and we don't always have to agree to respect each other. Let's go back to that.
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
and I have a question on respect that I'd like to pose back to you.
Yeah.
It's about, telling somebody that I hear what you're saying, I fundamentally disagree with it, and I want to pause and think about it. That to me is respect right there.
And I'm still willing to pause and think about it,
Yes.
is what I hear, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I may still disagree with you when it's said and done. And I'm the CEO of my company. I make decisions that not everybody likes sometimes. I'm aware of that. Yet I do the best I can. Again, following the tenets of improvisation as the the rules to the kingdom. To really respect what people say, so that if I make a decision that's not going to be favorable, at least I took time to understand them. And I mean that because that informs my decision. That even if this decision still is everybody's got to eat a red gumball, because that's an important one.
Why not?
Why not? Then the people who wanted a blue gumball or a green gumball understand why it's important to eat the red gumball, and I understand why everybody else wanted a different colored gumball. I don't know where. I guess my kids wanted gumballs yesterday, so it's in my brain. All right, I have a question for you. You mentioned respect before, and I love respect. I love dignity. I mean, it's so important, especially as it relates to you know inclusion and diversity and equity. So, to you, how does respect link to care?
I mean, my first thought goes back to what we talked about with, well, there's two thoughts, but they're linked. So it's that idea that respect is attention. So that's showing that I care about you. And it reminds me of that Teddy Roosevelt quote, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Hmm.
That's my initial link.
Yeah, I love that. I don't think you can have respect without care. And that doesn't mean you like somebody. Remember that, or at least the way I grew up, I always thought like apathy is way worse than hate.
Mm.
If somebody hates you or loathes you, in a heightened state of hate, they're thinking about you. They care enough
Yeah.
to actually hate you, as opposed to I don't care. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care at all, which is, sad and dangerous, especially if it's in a work environment.
Yeah, it is sad and dangerous. And it also makes me realize that there's an inhumanity to that. So it's about caring about a person as a human being. It doesn't mean, again, that you have to agree with each other. That's something I talk about in workshops too, is that listening does not equate to agreeing, which I think a lot of people get nervous about. Like, what? And I was like, in worst case scenario, what if they have a good point? Like, okay, so it rocks your beliefs a little bit, God forbid. And at the same time, to listen to understand goes back to creating that trust to even care to understand. So if
Yes.
you don't give a crap about the people you work with, or if it's mutual, that's a major problem, right? And there has to be a care. There has to be a way to humanize each other. So I'm not just looking at Bob as like a shell of a shadow who will get something done in marketing for me, that I'm just passing this to a taskmaster, because then there's no, what is that, right? And so it connects to what you talked about with accountability and that sense of accusation or stacking up or entitlement. Well, I did more than Bob. Bob, what did you do? How did you hit your KPIs? You know, like this kind of competitive edge. If we care for each other, accountability equates naturally to support. So you could like cut the, like I'm working to cut the word accountability out, because unless you really inherently enjoy holding yourself accountable, which I do, you strike me as someone who does.
Yeah.
There are people who do. At the same time, it does have a tendency to have a negative connotation in the workforce. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are in regards to shifting to looking at accountability as support, and how the tenets of improv, if there's any that stand out to you, that people can start putting to practice to make that shift.
You're bringing up many great points here, Christy, and I think for me, one of the negative connotations as it relates to accountability is because it's mostly associated with like finger pointing.
Totally.
That
Big
you're like,
foam finger. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, as opposed to saying we're on the same team here, and you slipped or I slipped. You know, holding yourself accountable means apologizing, which is humility. You know, it's like core aspects of who we are as we make relationships, being like, I'm not perfect and I don't need to be perfect. What I need to do is be on point, and sometimes I'll step on toes, and if I can recognize that, I apologize, and if I don't, hopefully somebody will call me out, because that means they respect me enough to call me out. It's
And
like,
that you have a trust to be
yeah,
able to be called out, right? Like, if
yeah,
I'm not going to apologize to you if I think you're going to be bean counting or holding that over my head.
yeah,
I will
exactly.
feel threatened. I'm going to feel not just vulnerable, but like I'm too proud. I'm not going to admit I made a mistake to Bob, because he's just going to be like, ha ha ha. See, I'm keeping a imaginary board with Christy tallies of her messing up. Like that's not going to be something so that again, if you can share it at all, like how that trickles down from the top, from how can leaders set that and model that idea of, I guess this is shifting gears a little bit, but embracing that sense of taking responsibility and making mistakes, and and how there is inherent humility, but how can leaders model that?
So you asked me a question before, which I think relates to this, and I'm going to start with the prior answer, and hopefully it will bridge to your question,
Mhm.
because it starts and stops with leaders. All right, let's just put it front and center here. You walk the talk, you lead by example, and if you're not doing it, why in the world would anybody else do it? You know, it's pretty much that simple. So for me, you mentioned, is there something from improvisation that can help? And there's this great phrase, unconditional support. So unconditional support, and a lot of people mess this up. Let me be really clear. A lot of people totally screw this beautiful phrase up, because they hear unconditional support, and what they think that means is that I've got to give up all my ideas just to support your ideas. And if you have a bad idea, I've got to make sure your bad idea works. And that's not the case at all. It's not the case on an improv stage. It's certainly not the case in a business environment. Unconditional support means that I got your back. It's that simple. And when you fall, I'm going to catch you. And when I fall, I believe that you're going to catch me too. And we unconditionally support each other as we go through this journey together. So it's not this idea that we're going to execute a really shitty idea that is going to get us in a lot of trouble. It's to say that we have to unconditionally support each other to get all ideas out there, so that we can find the truly best ideas and then support those great ideas. Because this goes back to the old adage, and I link this to Del Close. I've heard it's been mentioned by other people as well, yet I'm going to attribute to Del Close that the worst idea with great support will go much further than the best idea with no support.
Can you
And that's
say
what
that slower one more time?
the worst idea with great support will go much further than the best idea with no support. So if you think about that, then sometimes it's the people with the loudest voice or the people who are just shoving their ideas in that get their idea support and go through, as opposed to let's get all ideas out there. Let's hear from you, hear from me, hear from your children, my children. Let's get every idea out there humanly possible, and then let's pick and choose. Let's support, let's marry these together and find the truly best idea. Because if that truly best idea is buried by somebody who's just louder and or is the boss who's not listening to anybody else and doesn't know, especially in this environment where so much new stuff is happening on a day-to-day basis, we're missing opportunity to find the truly best idea and support that. Mm-hmm. And so this then goes back to the boss. This need to level status, level hierarchy, to get rid of ego and create these environments that are really rooted in unconditional support, which links directly to psychological safety, gets people talking with each other, which goes back to it's a basic human desire to be understood, which then creates value, which then is a different push than monetary, because people right now with the great resignation, they're in a money battle, as opposed to approaching it from a different angle, that when dollar comes to dollar, people don't quit companies, they quit people. And so this goes back to the leader. What kind of environment are you creating? What kind of communication style do you have? What kind of communication style are you letting other people have as well? So the accountability that we mentioned before doesn't have to be a negative thing, because we all need to be held accountable. And this then levels our own boss's status, because we are fallible and we will make mistakes, especially in this type of environment where we're trying to create new teams and cultures and ways to work. So we need that unconditional support team around us that will call us out and say, Emperor, you got no clothes on. It's time to rest.
You're butt naked.
Yeah.
Buddy. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
An acceptable story. So let's get real.
Yes. Everything you said, like, oh my goodness, it's you just did such a beautiful job of taking the last 40 minutes and just connecting all of it for people to understand, who are listening, who are leaders, who might be like, holy crap, we have to redo our entire system because our infrastructure of remote hybrid, what are we going to do? And what about ideas? And so if the leader is super stressed, because I was hearing this from you too, they're going to be faster chances with making decisions, with just being like, no, I don't have time to listen to perspectives. Let's just get it done. So that's a whole other thing. Leaders need to figure out ways that they're managing their own stress so they can come in with a broader, and the blinders aren't here, and they can see more and want to see more and feel more, right? Genuinely, versus checking a box. Like, leaders should want to hear everybody's perspective. So I'm just going to, and then you don't incorporate any of it. That's a different conversation, but okay. The increase too is the clarity I'm hearing on keeping everybody in the loop. What are we working towards, so that there is an inherent accountability, so that we're all part of this organization. We're very clear on where we're aiming for 2022. So we're going to reverse engineer to the departments of how each department is an essential organ to this organism. Then we're going to break down within the department how each person is of value to contribute to this, to contribute to that. It's it goes to the accountability piece, because when people understand that they have a sense of contribution and value, that is such a stronger reach than I think it's very underestimated. I feel that a lot of people don't keep that. They think money and titles, and then you internally promote, and it sounds great. I have a better title and money. I have never managed people though. So what the hell am I doing? And then it goes all awry. So just realizing that isn't necessarily the milestone that we used to think everybody wanted. That, from backing up from what you were saying, that sense of accountability comes from being able to let people know that you care, being able to really genuinely want to hear people's perspectives so that they know what their part is and they feel like it's appreciated. So that is so huge. We have to have you back because I have so many other questions, but I did want to hit on, you had said earlier on, something about resistance from companies understanding, and this could have been early on in your career, understanding the connection or the value of bringing improv in to benefit their productivity, their performance, their profitability. What's the biggest I mean, I right away cut to the meat and think fear. And so I know there's more to that than that, but what's the biggest resistance that you tend to run into with leaders and
How much
business?
time do we have?
We have 14 minutes, so make it fast.
All right. So it's changed. It's changed over time. So you think back to 1999 when I essentially formed my company. Created that program at the Duke Fuqua School of Business. Uh, at that time, improvisation wasn't really popular. It wasn't even in Hollywood. It was rejected by Hollywood. So it didn't. It wasn't until the mid 2000s when Hollywood started. It was tested with like Curb Your Enthusiasm. Oh, we could put marketing dollars around whose line is it anyway? And of course, there's a lot of people who were just incorporating small bits of improvisation. And outside of Christopher Guest movies, of course, which were going on decades before that, it's once Hollywood started realizing you can make money on this, that's when business, life imitates art type of thing. Like, oh, okay, what is this improvisation? So at first, it was just that it was unpredictable. Then it's improvisation's only comedy. And then it's improvisation what happens when everything else goes wrong. And now with essentially the fact that I have said this many times, improvisers are like weeds. We're everywhere, and you can't even get rid of us. You pluck them and they come back and there's a lot of people teaching this and it's not being taught correctly. I don't know, that's subjective, yet at the same time there's a lot of stuff out there that's just like you now have to convince people that what they learned was not the right way to do it. So there's a lot of resistance happening right now, and I think it's ironic because improvisation is an art form that's based in agility. I said it's communication and collaboration. It's also agility. It's adaptability. It's what's needed right now in the world, period, let alone in this type of environment in which we communicate through these specific mediums. So I think it's the opportunity for people to truly embrace improvisation is missed. And I don't know if that's resistance or not. I just think it's out there though. It's out there to help people.
And I think the resistance is complex. I think it's multi-layered. So that might not have been really a fair question because there I feel like there's a lot of unconscious resistance. There a lot of leaders are like, yeah, bring it, let's try it. And then you leave and you realize nothing's really changed. And so, or I don't know what to do with it from here, or this is a kind of a fun thing for people, but we're not going to really incorporate it because it's going to take too much work, or fun and business can't be, they're mutually exclusive. I mean, there's so much.
Oh, and that last one is inherently incorrect.
Totally.
Fun in
Speak to
business,
that.
not only I would say right now is not something that people should explore that. It's if you're missing that, then you're missing this human connection that getting people to learn and laugh at the same time is is so needed right now.
It
It's so
totally
desperately
is.
needed.
It totally is. And that can be our next episode, is diving headfirst into that, because there's so much there.
Yeah.
And I did want to, before we close out, I do want to ask, because I know that you guys are offering in regards to there's so many of the companies going virtually. I want to highlight that in a second, what you're offering. I also am wondering if you have any specific, not on site, it could be solely through Zoom, it could be leaders who are dealing with on site, remote, and hybrid. What are some exercises or even some advice that you would give for them to create a cohesive team and keep that connection alive with the different structure that's happening? Because I tend to, that a lot of leaders feel incredibly at a loss. They feel
Yes.
really overwhelmed by that.
Yeah. All right. So the uh, this is how we've run. Business Improv has always been virtual. We're a 22-year-old organization, and the only people who work out of my house are a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old little barbarian who will storm the gates occasionally. So, and my wife, of course, not a barbarian at all. She's a lovely person. Um, so this is the way we've always done it. And so when people are saying they can't create cohesion or chemistry or trust, it's because I think that there's a self-fulfilling prophecy attached to that because we've always done it this way. We have a brainstorming session, my team and I, in LA, Chicago, New York. I'm in the burbs of New York and North Carolina, 5 separate locations. Oh, and Napa Valley, six separate locations. We're all coming together, and we're going to be ideating in like an hour after this, and something that's very, very important, high stakes. So it's not that it can't be done. Go to the Carol DeWitt focus of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Those who are saying it can't be done are fixed. Those who are saying it can't be done yet are focusing now with that key pivotal word yet, which means that it can be done and it
Which
will be.
equates to hope. Yeah,
Yeah,
is hope.
absolutely, absolutely. So I would say start with yourself. Leaders out there, what are you doing? What's your behavior? What are you bringing to the table, and what's your mindset like? Because the rest of it is baby steps, baby steps, baby. You don't need to change the world overnight. You probably don't even need to change it before the year's done. And it's the 4th of December. No, it's the 7th of December right now. So uh, you have time to change it. So focus on what you can control and then put it in place.
And so what would be one small shift towards that? That if say that they are going to do a Zoom and they have people who are remote, people who are hybrid, and people on site, and they're like, guys, we're going to do the Zoom with the intention being just creating a bit, I mean, almost being, I always advocate be transparent. Say, hey guys, we're doing this because I'm very aware that we're all over the place and I
Yeah.
really want us to have a bit more cohesion because I sense that there's a bit of a disconnection and I want us all to feel a bit more connected. What would be one way, whether it's an exercise or that they can integrate maybe at the top of their next meeting?
Have a yes and conversation. It's simple, super easy. Every single sentence has to start with yes and. Yes and, yes and, yes and, yes and, yes and. Then have a continuation of that and say yes but. Only yes but. Every sentence must start with yes but, yes but, yes but, yes but. Talk about the difference between the two of them and which one's more productive, and follow whichever one of those two paths you want to for the rest of the meeting.
Beautiful. And I'll add on to that to pay attention to, because I have to incorporate that embodied self-awareness piece.
Oh yeah.
What it feels like when, so this is really cool. And if you have any amendment to this, dive in. So start with the yes and. So when you're the one verbally saying it, pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're sending it off to Bob, who's receiving it, pay attention when you're receiving it and pay attention when you're observing what is happening. Then with the yes, but pay attention to how different it feels.
Yes.
Receiving that and saying it and observing, and then have a conversation about that so that it really gets honed in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say as well, look at nonverbal communication, look at intonation, look at speed of delivery, stuff like that. What are people doing with their hands? How are they holding their hands one way or another way? It does change, especially if these are elongated conversations. And you can also superimpose the same exercise to like a brainstorming session. Everything comes as yes and, everything comes as yes but. Which round did you come up with the most ideas? Pretty simple stuff. And to your point, you have to have that level of self-awareness or self-audit, self-actualization, whatever you want to call it, that you're aware of what's going on if you are going to use this as a learning technique as well. Because if you're really in that growth mindset, then it should be not only just growing organizations, you're growing people inside the organizations.
Absolutely. Bob, thank you so much. This was so awesome. I want to give you an opportunity to highlight anything that Business Improv is offering right now that you guys are psyched about.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Christy. All right. So you know this from our conversation. Business Improv started going virtual in 2010 and started delivering in 2017. So we've been doing this for quite some time, and we've always been virtual. So New York, Chicago, LA, we are very comfortable running creating virtual teams, cultures, leaders, that type of stuff. We created an async program, 100% online, self-paced program called Improvisational Communication, which Christy, I believe you have a discount code
Yes, we
for all of
do.
your listeners.
Yep.
So you get a big fat discount. It's on Teachable. It's on. It's about 4 hours in content, all broken into small videos. Average video length is 3 minutes and 41 seconds. So snackable, very snackable. And it comes with worksheets that if you go through them and go through improvisational communication, you walk out with an action plan that says, this is how I will actually use these tools and techniques authentically for communication, collaboration, creativity, dealing with change, conflict, and ultimately creating something sustainable, culture with this. So you can find us on LinkedIn. You can get the book, as you mentioned before. Thanks for plugging the book.
Totally. Where can they buy this? Where can they? I think this is a fantastic place to start. And I would even say, like, such a great book club. If I know that different companies have their executive leadership team or supervisors or whoever have like a book club where they read a leadership book, this is such a great one to start with that you can incorporate like chapter by chapter. So where can they, I mean, it's the holidays, like bring a fun book. Don't just have it be a book that people have to just drone through. This has so many bite-sized exercises that you can apply. It has strategies of how to put into place too, so that you can have it complement with what Business Improv is offering online. So where can people buy the book?
Anywhere you buy books,
Anywhere you buy
Amazon.
books.
Yeah, wherever
That
you buy
easy.
books, go to those places. Amazon is a good one. Write a review on Amazon if you like it. If you don't like it, don't write a review.
I did write a review on Amazon and I meant every word I said. So yeah,
Hey,
so buy this anywhere you buy books. Okay. And then when people want to learn more about Business Improv, where can they go?
businessimprov.com.
Easy.
Easy.
I mean, could it get easier? I don't think so.
I hope not.
Let's
If there's a
not
way,
push it.
somebody will let me know, right? Because I'm open to learn.
Bob, thank you so much. I wish you and your family a wonderful holiday.
Hey, same to you, Christy. I hope it's a very happy holiday season and a great 2022.